Hey Comets, it's election day and we're asking your opinion on why this election is so important. So stay tuned and let's get the consensus of our campus. Thank you for joining us. I'm here with
Lauren Wallace. I am a senior public affairs major.
Hey, my name is Gabriel IG. I'm a sophomore here at UTD, political science major, and a proud brother of Mega Delta Phi Fraternity Incorporated.
Henry Anderson, one of the editors here at UCD TV.
Alexander.
So as of today, October 29th, early voting numbers have reached half of everyone who voted in the 2016 election. So why do you think voter turnout has increased so much this year compared to 2016?
That's a good question. I think in 2020 versus 2016, there is a lot more at stake. In 2016, we weren't facing a global pandemic. And we are basically still kind of in the throes of that pandemic right now, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better. And I don't think people feel that the current leadership is effectively tackling this pandemic. And this is kind of a problem that we all share, right? We're all living in this pandemic. I mean, there's evidence of that by the fact that we're doing this interview over Zoom instead of on campus. And so I think having this shared problem has really motivated people to get out and vote, and because they want to see that change, right? They want us to overcome this pandemic eventually. I think there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of excitement that what you do when you vote, it does matter, and we will see the change if we put in that work and we vote.
Well, I think this is fundamentally because of several things that have occurred recently. The first one off the top of my head would be the current COVID crisis and how the current administration has been handling the issue. Because of, well, whoever your opinions are of the president, irrespective of that, people's opinions of how the president has performed on the COVID issue and how the COVID crisis is continuing to expand will probably have prompted people to want to vote because they want a change of heart or to affirm what's going on currently. And much more based on the reactions of what's occurred over the summer with the Black Lives Matter protests and the police brutality that's resulted from that. It's clear that there's a disconnect between the elites and the majorities people, and that's caused a lot of people to want to come out to vote because they're afraid of a authoritarian-esque president that might be coming out.
It's easy. The actions of the Trump administration, Trump is just not a good president.
Well, I feel like it's due to a variety of reasons. I mean, with an increase of social media use, especially amongst the younger generations, there's been a lot of inspiration messages and promotion about voting. So I feel like that's one of the reasons. Another increase with it is especially due to the pandemic. A lot of people want to make sure that their vote's counted and to make sure it goes into the ballot. So whether it be in-person voting or mail-in, people want to ensure that their vote's being counted. And whether you view it as a conservative or a Democratic, I think all parties would agree that to them, it feels like the most consequential election in their lifetime. So a lot of people feel the stakes right now and want to make sure that they can vote and be represented.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned mail-in voting. So do you think people will continue with increased mail-in voting due to COVID-19, or will actually vote in person on election day?
Well, it's an interesting thing, especially with the pandemic in play, because it used to be before with mail-in voting, it was for people who were, in terms of Houston, Texas, if you weren't in the county, if you had a disability, if you were in our armed services, those were the main purposes of mail-in ballots. But now, due to the pandemic, a lot of people might see the mail-in as more convenient to vote in rather than going in person. So we might see an increase.
I would definitely say that mail-in voting will continue, though I'm not sure about the extent to it. I know mail-in voting was very huge this election, but to the extent of how much it will continue, I'm not sure. I know in Ohio, which voted Republican last year, they have a strong they have a lot of people do mail-in voting, even in past. I think mail-in voting will still continue on, regardless of the outcome of the election.
I do think we'll continue to see mail-in voting versus in-person voting. I still think the dominant choice will be in-person voting, just because it's probably the most widely known, the simpler way. But I do think we will see an increase, especially since, like, you know, for I think you call them midterm elections, maybe we'll still be in this pandemic. In that case, there's still going to be a lot of people doing mail-in voting. In terms of the next presidential election, I think there will be more mail-in voting than like 2016. Probably not as much because hopefully we'll be out of this pandemic, but I think a lot of people are going to be doing the mail-in voting for the first time, right? And then they're going to be like, oh, now that I know how to do this, it's simpler than I realized, simpler than I thought. So I'll just do it again. People are busy.
I think it's depending on whose perspective you look at. If you look at the perspective of someone who's in power currently, let's just say someone who's in a district where they're in danger of losing their seat soon, and based on how redistricting is this year because of the census, that can also cause massive issues for them. So if you're looking at the perspective of an elite, they would probably want to return to, exclusively speaking, in-person voting, because that allows them greater manipulation of the vote, as we've seen in Texas multiple times. We can look at how our campus has issues with voting polling until like the day of the election, and we all know how notorious that is with 5-hour lines. If we were to look at it from the perspective of a regular person or a person who's disenfranchised that's been able to vote now, they want mail-in voting because it would be easier to vote. It's a lot more convenient to do it without having to lose out on their job where they need money desperately. And it's a lot easier to be able to express their vote and be able to demonstrate it.
So the president has suggested concerns over the validity of the mail-in ballots, like you said. So regardless about how you feel, what side of the aisle you're on, do you feel that there's some legitimacy concerns, or do you feel like they're valid?
Well, personally for me, and this is trying to stay apolitical as possible, but there's been many studies proven by many newspapers, news organizations, other outlets that have shown this data showing that mail-in ballot is safe and that there's no evidence for major voter fraud that the president suggests.
Yeah, I think once information is revealed on whether or not votes were miscounted, or if there was any like illegitimate things going on, like, for example, I've seen in the news like ballot boxes are being, like mail-in ballot boxes are being burned or things like that. And I think once we kind of figure out if that's misinformation or disinformation, I think people will either feel empowered or they'll feel like, oh, actually, maybe this isn't a legitimate way for my vote to count, and I want to make sure my vote counts. So I will go ahead and just go in person. In that case, we probably wouldn't see as much mail-in voting. But
so I wouldn't say I'm not exactly surprised at the potential risks and potential nuances and changes with, one, a rapid change into mail-in voting, and two, with the fact that mail-in voting presents its own risks and its own issues with the privatization of the postal service as we see it. So in a way, yes, there are risks, but at the same time, we've noticed in places like Oregon, where we've seen mail-in voting occur repeatedly throughout the years with very little issues and very little indication of voter fraud, that it's a very potential good model. It can be done and it can be repeated all over the 50 states. We just need to make sure to learn what's going wrong, what can be improved, and how to implement it correctly next time.
I understand what he's trying to say, but I feel like there's no concern because, you have to have certain credentials to vote. You have to be registered to vote, and any fraudulent voting by mail is probably unlikely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know in the state of Texas, we have fail-safes for that. They check, your driver's license signature with the actual mail-in signature, so that if they don't match, they're invalidated. So that's for our viewers to know, just for peace of mind. So to jump to a different subject, if everything was normal right now, where would you travel?
Disney World! I've only been to 3 of the 4 parks. Back in 2018, my band did their annual band trip, and we go to Disney World every other year. And going there, I was like, I love this place. And I loved all the rides, just hanging out with my friends, seeing all the characters. And I got to meet Tinkerbell.
Definitely, I would want to travel New York. I've been there once in my life and I never got to fully explore the city. So it's something that's always been on my bucket list interest. But if I had to choose out of country, it would either have to be Rome, since I just love the Colosseums and the traditions and things like that, or Japan, something I've always wanted to experience. And as a kid, I used to love like the folklore and like samurai and things, like just major geek out when it comes to Japan culture. So yeah.
I'd say Puerto Rico. And the reason why is because my relatives are from Puerto Rico. I'm from Puerto Rico. And personally, I want to be able to go back at least once before my dad gets way too old for travel, so we can come back, meet his hometown, and see how things were in his day. And as well because I know that currently a lot of places in Puerto Rico, they haven't recovered from the hurricane. And so for me, it's also an opportunity to be able to go out and serve in a community and help out. And for me, it's one of those, one, I want to be able to see my roots, and two, I want to be able to actually help them out because of them suffering currently.
I've always wanted to go to Turkey, specifically Istanbul, because Asia's kind of right across the water, so you can go to Istanbul and then just take a ferry across the way and go to Asia as well. So I always thought that was really cool that those cultures are kind of side by side, and also Turkey's just like so rich in culture, and there's so much to do. There's nature, there's culture, there's architecture, amazing food. So yeah, I think I'd want to go to Turkey.
So today we learned a lot of people think that voter turnout has increased due to how the Trump administration has handled the current COVID-19 pandemic, and that most people think that mail-in voting will continue to increase and is just as secure as in-person voting. Also, people are already planning their next vacation. They're just waiting for the stars to align. Make sure to check out a segment of the Feature of the Week by Eduardo. It'll definitely keep you entertained while you're waiting in line to vote. And if you haven't gone out to vote already, polls close at 7 p.m. Have your voice heard, Comets.